Hello, today I'm going to read to you a book. I'm going to start reading a book called Where Hope Takes Root by His Highness the Aga Khan, Shah Karim Al Husseini. The introduction of the book is written by Adrienne Clarkson, who was the 26th governor of Canada. Funnily enough, I just realized that I actually had the pleasure of meeting Adrienne Clarkson just 2 days ago at a law event, and I'm just realizing now who she is. She was a woman with a very keen eye, I must say. She stared at me when we got introduced, and I stared into her eyes, and she stared into mine, and we just greeted each other and went on, but now I know who she is. Introduction. My interest in His Highness the Aga Khan and his vision dated back to 1957. Then, as a young university student, I read about Prince Karim, who had suddenly inherited his grandfather's mantle as the Imam, spiritual leader of the Ismailis. His grandfather had been a remarkable figure of worldwide renown. The young prince was still a student at Harvard, and I remember thinking, how does he feel about inheriting this enormous responsibility as the leader of the Ismailis at the age of 20? In the early 1970s, I was well aware of the Ismailis, who among other Asians were fleeing Uganda, and of our reception of thousands of them here in Canada. I was always grateful that our country, under the leadership of Pierre Elliott Trudeau, welcomed these people who had found themselves in an extremely difficult and dangerous situation in the country that they had called home. When I became Governor General of Canada in 1999, I met a number of Ismailis in prominent positions in Ottawa and in Toronto, and later in many of the cities across Canada. But it was not until 2002 that I met His Highness during one of his visits to Ottawa. Immediately, I was deeply impressed by this soft-spoken man who had given nearly 5 decades of his life to bettering society in very practical and meaningful ways. His contributions to education and health and cultural revitalization through architecture and town planning in the developing world were without equal. I was very happy to meet His Highness several more times throughout my years in Ottawa and to participate in the foundation ceremony of the delegation of the Ismaili Imamate in June 2005. I remember the day of the ceremony well. Tents had been erected over the area where the guests were seated, and flowers had been planted to create a garden atmosphere and a sense of beauty and lightness. In my exchanges with His Highness that day, I felt very much that our country could not have a more useful or meaningful relationship. The Aga Khan understands profoundly what Canada is all about and what a diverse society can accomplish if it is built on awareness of difference and relaxed understanding. In the speeches collected in Where Hope Takes Root, the Aga Khan explains the principles that inform his profound belief that civil society, democracy, and mutual understanding must be encouraged and strengthened in order for the world to be a better place. The Aga Khan is not only a spiritual leader. As Imam, he is responsible both for leading the interpretation of the faith and for helping to improve the quality of life for all in the wider communities in which Ismailis live. This dual obligation is often, I think, quite difficult to appreciate from the Christian viewpoint of the role church leaders are expected to perform. In Islam, the worlds of faith and action, of ethical premise and society are treated together. The Aga Khan sees his responsibilities as encompassing a strong commitment to the well-being and dignity of all human beings, regardless of faith, origin, or gender. The intersection of faith and society had led to initiatives that over the last 50 years have made a profound difference in the developing world. The Agahan Development Network has improved the lives of some of the poorest, most deprived, and most diverse populations in the world. The Agahan realizes that no effective development can happen without the precondition of a healthy civil society. Only a strong civil society can help sustain real change for both rural populations, which are geographically isolated, and the urban poor, who are similarly marginalized from the social, economic, and political life of their wider society. The second precondition for successful development is something for which Agahan and his development network are now increasingly well known: a commitment to pluralism. The efforts of the Imamat have had a pervasive effect over the last decade, particularly in making the world understand how society must support people of different backgrounds and interests to organize themselves in diverse institutions for a variety of purposes, all in the context of a creative, free expression. Pluralism is as important as human rights in ensuring peace, democracy, and a better quality of life. In these speeches, His Highness points out how the rejection of pluralism has helped to incite hatred and conflict among many cultures, nations, and religions. This has occurred in places as varied as Afghanistan, Tajikistan, Rwanda, and the Democratic Republic of Congo. These sad examples show us that pluralism is critical to peaceful, harmonious understanding. The Agahan understands too that pluralism does not happen by accident, but is the product of enlightened education, moral and material investment by governments, and the recognition by all of our common humanity. As His Highness recognizes, Canada is very open to these ideas. 80% of Canadians believe it a good thing that we are a diverse population. In this, we may be unique in the world. It is a happy situation for us to have communities of people who are educated, are confident in their identity in Canada, and feel assured of the depth of both their own traditions and those of the people who share their institutions and governmental structures. In the public utterances, the Agahan shows great subtlety of mind. He has been the inspiring founder of universities and colleges, because education is one of the democratic pillars he recognizes. He exhorts people everywhere to train leaders and to shape institutions using high standards of excellence. His sensitivity to formal learning alerts us that education is not the promulgation of dogmatic commitment or ideological choices. Instead, as he emphasizes, scientific problem solving must exist side by side with a continued openness to new questions. Memorably, His Highness asserts that the deplorably fashionable phrase "clash of civilizations" is really a clash of ignorance. The ignorance is both historical and current, and he is unequivocal in his belief that it could have been avoided through more dialogue and understanding between the Judeo-Christian and Muslim worlds. I find His Highness's beliefs in what democracy can do to be most inspiring of all. He understands the need for us to be flexible in supporting the diverse institutions that make up democratic life. He is clear-eyed and decisive about the breakdown in democratic institutions such as parliaments, which often lack an efficient structure and human capacities to grapple with complexity. Above all, he understands that democracy can only come about through education and awareness. Finally, His Highness identifies the need to strengthen public integrity as the sound foundation on which democracy can rest. It is not simply governments that make democracy work. The most successful democracies are those in which the non-governmental institutions of a diverse civil society play a vital role. Again and again, the Agahan returns to the need for respect and cooperation between Islamic and Western peoples. The Quran tells us that mankind was created by a single creator from a single soul, a powerful affirmation of our common humanity, something that differentiates humans from other forms of life. His Highness also speaks meaningfully about the need to maintain a profound humility before the divine. With this kind of humility, we can turn away from dogma and approach each other as human beings, meeting on a field of respect without anger, without discrimination, and without preconceptions. Humility that will lead us away from self-righteousness and ready-made ideology and open us to genuine religious feeling in its most positive form. In these remarkable speeches, the Agahan gives us a deep sense of what it is to live a life of spiritual and ethical commitment. Across religious, cultural, and racial distinctions, we can all help create a universal ethical sensibility. The Right Honorable Adrian Clarkson, PCCC CMM CD, 26th Governor General of Canada, November 15, 2007. Now we can proceed to read the first speech. Enhancing pluralism. Keynote speech concluding the Prince Claus Fund's Conference on Culture and Development. Amsterdam, the Netherlands, September 7, 2002. It is with gratitude and admiration that I participate in this event today. It gives me the opportunity to express publicly the enormous respect in which I hold Prince Claus and the very great importance I attach to the work of the Prince Claus Fund for Culture and Development. The founding purpose of the Prince Claus Fund, expanding insight into cultures and promoting interaction between culture and development, has been fulfilled by means of a vigorous program of grants, awards, and publications. These actions recognize, stimulate, and support activities that share the principles of equality, respect, and trust, and have the highest levels of quality and originality. Through them, the fund is making a very significant contribution in an area I believe will be critical to the development of humankind in the 21st century, the strengthening and enhancement of pluralist civil society in all corners of the globe. The work of the fund has given legitimacy and stimulus to the broadest range of intellectuals, artists, and committed groups and organizations, frequently in areas of the world where the importance of such creativity is not recognized and indeed is often repressed. These initiatives constitute highly creative investments in the identification and premiation of forces working to strengthen and enhance the pluralism of cultures that will provide strength into the future. It is my conviction that strengthening institutions that support pluralism is as critical for the welfare and progress of human society as are alleviating poverty and preventing conflict. In fact, all three are intimately related. The field of development has yielded more than its share of buzzwords, Phrases like civil society, poverty alleviation, and sustainable development are familiar to many of you, as is the phrase enabling environment. I must carry responsibility for that, since it was the Enabling Environment Conference in Nairobi, sponsored by the Aga Khan Development Network, the World Bank, and others, that brought that phrase into common use. I hope my remarks might result in some more buzzing, because the essence of what I will say this evening refers to enhancing pluralism. I do not think it is necessary to spend time outlining the challenge that the process of globalization represents, vice versa, the cultural fabric of our world. But the content of the new media is not the real threat, nor even is its domination by media giants. The problem is that large segments of all societies in the developing world and developed world are unaware of the wealth of global cultural resources and therefore of the need to preserve the precious value of pluralism in their own and in others' society. Unfortunately, pluralism has not seen any development that parallels the recent acceptance by international public opinion of the imperative to preserve and enhance our natural environment and the world's cultural heritage as public goods worthy of general support. I would go even further and say that the inability of human society to recognize pluralism as a fundamental value constitutes a real handicap for our development and a serious danger for our future. Since the end of the Cold War, a number of factors appear to have been common and significant ingredients in, if not the primary cause, of many of the conflicts we have witnessed. Perhaps the most common of these ingredients is the failure of those involved to recognize that human society is essentially pluralist. Peace and development require that we seek by every means possible to invest in and enhance that pluralism. Groups that seek to standardize, to homogenize, if you will, or if you will allow me, to normalize all that and those around them must be actively resisted through countervailing activities. Whether in Central Europe, the Great Lakes region of Africa, or Afghanistan, to cite just one example from these three different continents, one of the common denominators has been the attempt by communal groups, be they ethnic, religious, or tribal, to impose themselves on others. All such attempts are based on eradicating the cultural basis that provides group identity. Without cultural identity, social cohesion gradually dissolves. Human groups lose their necessary point of reference to relate to each other. For pluralism to succeed, the general education of the population involved must be sufficiently complete so that individual groups defined by ethnicity, religion, language, and the like understand the potential consequences of actions that might impinge on others. This is, for example, one of the principal reasons why today there is so much uninformed speculation about the conflict between the Muslim world and others. For instance, the historical root causes of conflict in the Middle East or in Kashmir are not addressed at any level of general education in the most powerful Western democracies that dominate world affairs. As a Muslim, I stand in front of you in amazement that the Western world had to experience the revolution in Iran to learn about Shia Islam or the civil war in Afghanistan, to learn about Wahhabi Islam. Please remember that we are talking about a religion that 1/5 of the world population follows. The ignorance is equivalent to Muslims being unaware of the distinction between Catholics and Protestants with Christianity. The point I wish to make is that the governments, Civil societies and peoples of this world will be enabled to build strong, pluralist societies with the present level of global cultural ignorance. Even the most developed countries will need a massive effort to educate the world's youth in a more thoughtful, competent, and complete manner to prepare them for the global responsibilities they will be expected to fulfill. This education is particularly critical in the increasing number of functioning democracies where an informed public plays such a central role. The actions to enhance pluralism have to be matched in the developing world by programs to alleviate poverty because, left alone, poverty will provide a context for special interests to pursue their goals in aggressive terms. Urgent humanitarian assistance is indispensable, but it should be part of the long-term strategy of helping the recipient community develop its own resources that can help improve the socio-economic conditions of the poorer segments of the population and provide charitable support for those unable to work. As you know, development is sustainable only if the beneficiaries become gradually the masters of the process. This means that initiatives cannot be contemplated exclusively in terms of economics, but must be seen as an integrated program that encompasses social and cultural dimensions. Education and skill training, health and public services, conservation of cultural heritage, infrastructure development, urban planning and rehabilitation, rural development, water and energy management, environmental control, and even policy and legislative development are among the various aspects that must be taken into account. To illustrate this approach, I would like to say something about the work that the Aga Khan Development Network has recently launched in Afghanistan. The scenario is dramatic. A country destroyed by decades of war, lacking basic infrastructure, economic resources, and institutional fabric, and suffering from strong, antagonistic social and religious forces. The government must also facilitate the return to the country of hundreds of thousands of displaced families, feed the population, restore agricultural production, provide essential social services, eradicate drug-related crops and their ancillary industries, and last but most essentially, consolidate a culture of tolerance based on the mutual understanding among peoples of different origins and languages. In the context of the Aga Khan Development Network has started work in Afghanistan based on an accord signed with the government. In the first phase, the network's priority will be to respond to the most pressing problems. Activities underway include providing humanitarian aid to address both the food shortage in the country and the needs of hundreds of thousands of displaced people by facilitating the resettlement of refugees and rehabilitating buildings and public works required to provide basic social services. Simultaneously, planning is underway to help address the country's needs in terms of building human and institutional capacity for social and economic development. The network is taking steps to revive and update institutions to train teachers and nurses to meet the needs of urban and rural populations. Work is also underway to reform the school curriculum in accordance with the government's guidelines and the current international experience, and to make basic health services accessible to all. We are establishing a microfinance facility to provide financing for agriculture, micro-enterprise, small businesses including cultural enterprise, and the special needs of refugees returning to properties that have been destroyed. In all of this work, The cultural dimension is pivotal because of the pluralistic nature of Afghan culture and the severe stress it has endured in the recent past. As an initial undertaking, the Agahan Trust for Culture is working in Kabul to rehabilitate the historic fabric of the ancient city, its monumental buildings, traditional housing, and decade public spaces. These projects are centered on two significant historic sites: the mausoleum of Timur Shah, considered by many to be the founder of modern Afghanistan, and the Paradise Garden of Babur, the founder of the Mughal Empire in Indian subcontinent. The goals range from the preservation and restoration of symbolic monuments of Afghan history and cultural identity, to the very practical, immediate employment opportunities and the rebuilding of marketable skills. All of them are essential to enable the people of Afghanistan to rebuild their country in peace and dignity. I would like to leave you with a final thought and some questions and conclusions that flow from it. Developing support for pluralism does not occur naturally in human society. It is a concept that must be nurtured every day, in every forum, in large and small government and private institutions, in civil society organizations, working in the arts, culture, and public affairs, in the media, in the law, and in the areas of social justice such as health, social safety nets, and education, and economic justice such as employment opportunities and access to financial services. It is not high time, perhaps even past time, that a systematic effort be undertaken to document best practices by looking closely at the array of public policies and structures that support pluralism in particular national settings. As we extract lessons and identify models, should we not put a process in place to share them widely for application? Should not this effort reach out to many countries as possible, and in as many organizational and institutional settings as we can mobilize? In addition, each one of us can help enhance pluralism in our personal, professional, and institutional domains. We could play our role in favor of pluralism as public opinion makers. We could participate in and support the efforts of groups and NGOs that promote that cause. We could volunteer our professional competencies in a variety of fields, academic, technical, or managerial. We could also serve the cause of pluralism simply through tolerance, openness, and understanding towards other people's cultures, social structures, values, and faiths, thereby setting an effective example in our own society. My hope is that society as a whole will not only accept the fact of its plurality, but will undertake as a solemn responsibility to preserve and enhance pluralism as one of our fundamental values and inescapable condition for world peace and further human development. This was the first speech. Many more to go. This one was called Enhancing Pluralism. The next chapter we will read tomorrow is called Is Civil Society Bankable? Thank you for listening. See you next time.